Good morning, guys. We are going to go ahead and go over chapter 10, section 4, which is on triangles. So yesterday we talked about circles. Today we're going to talk about triangles. We are going to kind of define what a triangle is and then get into a couple of examples that you guys are going to see throughout this chapter and throughout your homework. So a triangle, the definition of that is a figure that has three sides and three angles. More specifically, and it's not in your textbook or on the paper that you guys have, but a triangle needs to be connected. So if a shape has three sides and one of the sides isn't connected, you need to make sure that you're not labeling it as a triangle. So because they have three angles, the points or the vertices have to all be touching one another. So on this screen are two examples of triangles. We will get into classifying triangles in a couple slides from here. But one of the other things that's important to remember with triangles is yesterday we talked about circles. The sum of a circle is 360 degrees. The sum of a triangle, all of the angles, are going to add up to 180 degrees. So looking at this first example, this is part of what you guys are going to see. It's very similar to what you guys did the other day with complementary and supplementary angles. When you had 90, you were trying to add the 2 to 90 degrees for right triangles or complementary angles. And then for supplementary, you were making sure it added to 180. So it's very similar to that same process, except for because now it's a triangle, you guys have three sides that you're dealing with. So if you look at this triangle, it says find M angle of Z in the triangle. That M stands for measure. So the title of this is finding a missing measure. So you're finding the measure of angle Z. So remember to use that angle sign. So as you can see in the triangle, X is 43 degrees and Y is 119 degrees. So this is where this came from. So when I add these two together, I would get 119 plus 43 is what I'm talking about. So I can add them together and then move it to the other side to get Z by itself. So when I do that, 119 plus 43 is going to give me 162. Then I'm going to subtract 162 from 180. $180 minus 62 is going to give me 18 degrees. So Z is going to be 18. I don't know what happened to my writing tool. So let's find that. There it is. All right. So this would be 162, and I subtracted and got 18 degrees. So that would be your missing side. And then looking at the next slide, I have a multiple choice question that's kind of the same thing that you guys just did. So it says the Alabama state flag is constructed with the triangle shown. What is the missing measure in the design? So again, they're going to add up to 180. So I have 110 and 35, and I need to find this missing side. So I have 110 and 35. When I add those together, I'm going to get 145. And then I can do 180 minus 45. I'm going to borrow and subtract. So I would get 35. So on this one, the correct answer would be C. So again, you're adding all three sides together and they need to be equal to 180. So looking at these next couple of slides is when we're going to start getting into kind of classifying triangles. So classifying shapes. So some key vocabulary on this. A congruent segment just means that they have the same length. So if you see the word congruent, that means they're the same or that they are equal to one another. So a couple other notes just on this slide. Every triangle has at least 2 acute angles. We're going to talk about that in a second, what that actually means. And then that little bottom note is how you can classify triangles. So when you are asked to classify a triangle, there are 2 ways and 2 things that you need to write down. You need to classify them by their side and also their angle. So you're not going to just classify it by their side or by their angle. You're going to classify them by both. So just for example, looking up here, you can classify them by their sides. There is an equilateral triangle. That means that all 3 sides are the same length. Then you have an isosceles triangle where at least 2 sides have the same length. So this bottom side and then the side, line going across the top is not going to be equal to those 2. And I know sometimes that's difficult to see, but it will be labeled and you guys will see that kind of throughout your homework. Then there's what's called a scalene triangle. It has no sides that are equal in length. So again, it's kind of difficult to tell, but this bottom side is longer than the side that is standing up. So those are by the sides. Then by the angles. So you can have a right triangle, and we've already talked about this before. Again, there's this little box. It has an angle that is 90 degrees. Then there is what is called an acute angle when it has all 3 angles that are acute. So we've talked about acute means less than 90 degrees. So if they're all less than 90, and then an obtuse triangle has at least one angle or has one angle that is obtuse, meaning greater than 90. So this top angle right here is the one that is obtuse. The other 2 would be acute. This would not be an acute triangle because it has to have all 3 angles that are acute. So when you're classifying a triangle, you're going to say that it is a right isosceles or that it is an obtuse scalene triangle. So you need to use one word from kind of each section. They go hand in hand with one another. Okay. So looking at this is a triangle on the side of a house. These 2 lines right here are showing you, and this is what I meant by it'll kind of be easy for you guys to see. These 2 lines show that these 2 sides are equal to one another. So looking at this house, this right here is an obtuse angle. And there are 2 congruent sides. So remember, congruent means that they're equal to one another or they're the same. So this would be what is called an obtuse isosceles triangle. It's obtuse because of the top. And then the isosceles triangle is the one that had at least 2 sides that were the same length. So going back to that right here, it looks like this. And then the isosceles has at least 2 sides that are the same. So if you think about rotating this triangle and kind of putting it on top of a house, that's what it looks like. Then you are also going to be asked to draw triangles, and I'm going to go over 2 different examples with you guys. So the first one says to draw a triangle with 1 right angle and then 2 congruent sides, and then classify the triangle. So I put the ways to classify them up here just so you guys could see it while we're going over this example. So if I am looking at this, I'm going to draw a triangle with 1 right angle. A right angle in a right triangle looks like this. So I'm going to start with that part. So I have a line going this way and pretend that's a straight line. So now I have a right triangle or a right angle. So I did that part, and then 2 congruent sides. So these 2 sides, I know they're not exactly equal to one another because I didn't measure them out, but they are equal to one another. And then I'm going to close off my triangle. So I have a right angle and I have 2 sides that are equal. So if I were to then classify this triangle, It is a right triangle, and then it has at least two sides that are the same length. So this would be a right isosceles triangle. So I would write this down in your notes, or at least have it up on your phone or on your computer when you guys are going over your homework, just to kind of have that guide with you so you don't have to keep flipping back and forth or getting confused as to what they are, just so you have those 6 things there for you to look at. So then this last example of drawing a triangle asks you to draw a triangle with one obtuse angle. So I'm going to just start there. So obtuse looks like this. So the angle is greater than 90. So I'm just going to do something like this. Remember, 90 would be straight up and down. So this is larger than 90 degrees. So I have my obtuse angle, and then it has no congruent sides. So I'm actually going to make this side a little bit shorter. So those two sides are not the same length. And then I'm going to connect this. Obviously, or hopefully your triangles will look a little bit better. Drawing online is not always the easiest. So now I need to classify it. So none of these sides are congruent. So looking at the sides, they don't have 3 sides that are equal. There's not 2 sides that are equal. There are no sides that are equal. So as far as classifying by sides, this is a scalene triangle. And then it asked you to automatically draw an obtuse angle. So because it kind of uses obtuse angle, this is an obtuse triangle. So if you're classifying this, you would say that this is an obtuse scalene triangle, or scalene obtuse triangle. Either way, as long as you have both of those words in there. So when you're classifying, make sure you have not just one word. It's an acute equilateral, it's a right isosceles, it's a right scalene, it's an obtuse isosceles. Whatever the combination is, you need to make sure you have a word from classifying the sides and from classifying the angles. So if you guys have questions, please let me know. I hope you have a great Thursday. And if you have questions, I'm here to help. Thanks, guys.